Hello, and welcome to this next video in our Genesis series. And today we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, which is talking about the celestial objects in the sky, the sun, moon, and stars. And you can see here from the card that I'm holding, we're looking at the sun here, and of course, we are looking at the physical sun, but we're talking about the Son of God, the true light of the world. And of course, if you know Jesus, you know the peace of God. And if you don't know him, you ultimately have no peace. And we're going to be talking about that aspect of this as well. So let's just jump right in. So, again, we're talking about Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19. And it reads, I'm going to read the first part here. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights. So let's stop right there for a moment. And let's break this down a little bit. And as is our usual custom, we're going to be looking at the technical side first, and then we'll look at the prophetic aspects of this a little bit later. And I'm going to go to our tools here so we can look at the Hebrew and see here again we start with the word and. This is that polysyndeton that goes throughout the entire creation account, Genesis chapters 1 and 2, and that's our Bob conjunctive right there, connecting this verse with the previous passage because the creation event is a continuous stream of God's creative work from Genesis 1:1 all the way to the end of Genesis chapter 2. And of course, we see here he says, let there be again. And this time it's lights instead of light. So before, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 3, we had God saying, let there be light. And we know from 1 John 1:5 that since God is light and there's no darkness in him at all, his essence is light. And therefore, it's not something that he created. It's just something that he manifested into the earth domain. And here, this is a different Hebrew word. It has the root word or, that's the Hebrew word for light. But this is ma-or. And as you see that take place here, this is known as a light bearer or a luminary or a light holder or like a lamp. So this isn't the light itself. This is something that holds the light, or it's something that shines forth the light, but it's not the light itself. So again, we have the word or here. That's the Hebrew word for or. Ma-or is speaking of something that's holding the light, something that is a lamp or something that is bearing forth that light. And of course, he commands that this be done in the firmament. And now this is the celestial heaven that we're talking about, what we might call in scientific terms outer space, in the firmament of the heaven. And he's calling this to divide the day from the night. Now, this is interesting because if we go back and we look at Genesis 1, 3, and 4 for a moment, you'll see it says, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. Okay, so now, he divided the light from the darkness. He calls the light day and the darkness night. And now, down here in Genesis 1, 14 and 15, we see that he is commanding that these light bearers are manifested or created in the firmament of the heaven, the celestial heaven, to divide the day from the night. So before he divided the light from the darkness, and then he called the light day and called the night darkness. And now he's calling these light bearers to serve in the capacity of dividing the day time from the night time in each 24-hour day that we experience. And so with that concept in mind, he also commands this, where he says, and let these lights, let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years. And so when we see this term signs here, we can look at that in the Hebrew. Right here it is, let them be for signs. That's that Hebrew word ot right there. And for seasons, this is the moed, also known as the moedim, if you pluralize it. And these moedim, these are in particular, they're speaking of the 7 Levitical feasts that are commanded by God for Israel to keep in Leviticus chapter 23. And of course, those are the Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of First Fruits, Pentecost, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And these are the 7 original Hebrew feast days that God commanded them to observe throughout all their generations. And these things obviously speak to the prophetic plan of God throughout time, because we know that Christ himself fulfilled the first 3 feasts during his earthly ministry, because he was the Passover lamb. He was the unleavened bread, his body broken for us, and he was placed in a tomb. And then he did rise again on the day of first fruits. That was the day of the resurrection. And so he completed all that in his earthly ministry. Then after his ascension, 10 days later, after he ascends, after the resurrection, he sends forth the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost, and that fulfilled that feast. And that we are still in the church age, in the season, the spiritual season, if you will, of Pentecost. And myself, like many others, believe that as Peter gave that first sermon, where he preached that this is the fulfillment of the prophet Joel, and how the Holy Spirit being poured out on all flesh. And keep in mind that that is still happening to this day. So it had an immediate fulfillment, but its fulfillment carries on throughout the entire church age, and it will have its ultimate fulfillment at the end times, which we are right on the verge of. And there's a debate on this, so I'm not dogmatic about it, but there's different groups that have different viewpoints. One viewpoint due to Enoch, many scholars believe that, Jewish scholars taught that Enoch was born on the same day that he was raptured. So, in other words, he was raptured on his birthday, and he was 365 years old when he was raptured. And so many teach, and many think, and many believe that he was raptured on the day that he was born, and many theorize and speculate that that was actually on the day that we now call Pentecost. And so some people, year after year, they look at Pentecost as a day for the church to be raptured. And as we know, this church suddenly, with a mighty rushing wind, the church suddenly appeared. And so some people believe that one day, on one future Pentecost, the church will be suddenly disappeared and taken up in the rapture. Of course, others believe that Pentecost has been fully fulfilled already, and the next feast that we're to be looking to is the Feast of Trumpets, and that will be the rapture. And some people believe that it's somewhere in between the two, somewhere in between Pentecost and Feast of Trumpets, that the rapture will occur. Of course, any of those theories might be. We can't say for 100% sure. Different people have their different viewpoints, and I'm not here to push one viewpoint over the other. But I would say those are two very, very strong possibilities. Pentecost, some future Pentecost, or some future Feast of Trumpets. And of course, we have a Feast of Trumpets coming up right around the corner in just a couple of weeks. So if you're a trumpets person who thinks the rapture is going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets, uh, get your house in order, get ready, because you never know. This could be the year. It could be the time. So the other interesting thing about these signs, because we talked about the seasons here, the Moedim, but the signs is also interesting because we have the signs in the heavens. And I'll just show this to you real quick here. I'm not going to go over the whole thing because you can come read it on your own. You can get it for free online. And it's a very famous work done by Joseph A. Seiss. He originally published it back in the 1880s. And his great work is called The Gospel in the Stars. And this shows how, if you look at the Hebrew Matzoroth, or what we would call the perverted version, the Zodiac, um, the original version, not the way it's been kind of perverted into Greek and Roman mythologies and things like that, but the original version was actually that God had placed the gospel in the stars. And you can go through this and take a look. He gives a very good demonstration of it. Just search on Joseph A. Seiss, Gospel in the Stars, and you'll find it. You can get to the same place where I'm at here, and you can go down and read it. And it starts with the Mazzaroth, or these constellations, and it talks about them in terms of how, starting with Virgo and going to Libra and Scorpio and so on and so forth. These, of course, are the pagan names for these things, but there's also, the original names that they had. And then also, at a similar time, here in the Companion Bible, you can take a look at this. It's in the appendix, the appendix of his E.W. Bullinger's work on this. His treatment of it is in appendix number 12, right here. You can see it right there. Appendix number 12. And he has several pages on this, detailing many of the same things that Seiss does. And then if you really want to dig into this, Chuck Missler does a great treatment on it in his Gospel in the Stars presentation. You can just search on that on YouTube. He has several videos on it where he breaks it down and goes over all the different constellations, which are the original, the Hebrew Matzoroth, and how that originally the stars all had names, and the names of the stars, when ordered in the order of their brightness, in other words, the brightest star in that constellation is the first name, the second brightest star the second, the third brightest star the third, and so on. So if you put the stars in the order of their names, put their names in the order of the brightness of the stars, their names told a story. And so if you went through each constellation that's in the sky during each month of the year, and all of their decans, that means, there's a primary constellation that's the focus, and then there's 3 decans for each one. And so really there's 4 constellations to look at each month, and as each month goes by, it tells a part of the gospel story and one different aspect of, of course, the virgin birth, that's Virgo, and then it just goes through the whole progression of Christ's ministry, and then ultimately ends with Christ the King, Leo the lion, Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah, as we would say. And so if you want to take a look at that, it's some really awesome information, and it shows that God's gospel plan was written in the stars long before the written word of God was ever given to Moses. So people had the gospel preached to them literally from the heavens, from the very beginning, even before man was on the earth, because this is taking place on the 4th day that God places the sun, moon, and stars in the heavens. And so it's a really interesting study if you want to take a look at it. I'm not going to go into all the details here because it's been done by other people. And so I'm just sharing it with you here. So if you don't know about it, you might want to take a look at it. Pretty great stuff. So moving on here, And of course, we do have, some people have different views on it, but currently, there's a reemergence, a renewed interest in what people were calling back in 2017 the Revelation 12 sign, which is centered around the constellation Virgo, with the sun at her head and the moon at her feet and a crown of 12 stars. And people are looking in the heavens right now and seeing a lot of celestial objects. And that sign seems to be reemerging now here in 2023. Um, over 6 years later, the sign seems to be coming back into view because a lot of the similar things that were seen in that constellation in 2017 are manifesting now in 2023, only with a greater measure of celestial objects converging in this particular time period. And that's happening here in the next couple of weeks as well. So if you're interested in looking at signs, that's an interesting one to look at. Several people have already done videos on that. So you can easily find that. Just search on Revelation 12 sign, you'll find 100 videos. This video is not about that, but we are talking about the signs, and that's a lot of people are talking about that as a potential sign for the imminency of the end times right on our doorstep here in the coming weeks, months, years. Who knows how long it's going to be for sure, but it is definitely soon. Okay, so if we look at this, uh, God proclaims several purposes here for these lights. Um, First of all, they are to be lights in the firmament of the heaven. Next, they're to divide the day from the night. Next, they're to be for signs, as we just talked about, for seasons, and for days and years. And this is very important because we talked in a previous lesson about the fact that some people who tried to be more precise by thinking that they could measure time with the speed of light as an absolute constant got hilariously off track by doing that because God proclaims that we are to use the celestial objects, the macro objects in the universe, for keeping time, orbital time, not atomic processes. And why is that? Well, because atomic processes are not constant. And this has been discovered in the past, um, say, actually, really, it's been kind of discussed and somewhat known, um, or debated about at least, for the past roughly 60 years. This has been discussed, but in the past 20 years, it was really started to be talked about, and then in the past 10 years, it's finally confirmed, absolute scientific fact, that the speed of light is not an absolute constant, as some had proclaimed and many had supposed. And we know that that's not true now. And the speed of light is slowing down. It has been slowing down since the beginning. And Barry Setterfield, the leading physicist in this particular field of study, he's done a great job on his website, barrysetterfield.org. I'd highly recommend that you read all of his work. And he basically proves that through the redshift data that they've been compiling for many, many, many decades now, he shows through the redshift data that it perfectly matches the slowdown of the speed of light since creation. Um, and it's a cosecant sine squared curve, where it was going such and such speed, and then it's tapered off in uh, more recent eras to more what we have now. And now it is still slowing down, but it's slowing down very, very minutely. But you can go and track his data and he shows his process and his methods and his reasoning and has the data to back it up, showing that the speed of light was going hundreds, tens, if not up to 100 million times faster in creation at the time of creation than it is now. And now it's slowed down to pretty much um, its limit. It's slowed down to its final speed almost, although it is still slowing down very slightly now. but it is indeed slowing down. And so as we see that, and we see that as a fact, if you can go back in history, they measure the whole reason we have so-called 14 billion years is because they thought the speed of light was an absolute constant throughout time. And so they extrapolated radiometric data from atoms, radioactive half-life, substances, and other things, and other methods that they used based on the oscillation of the cesium atom, which keeps track of seconds. And they said, okay, this is the how much a second equals based on one oscillation of, or based off the oscillations of the cesium atom. They determined exactly what they termed a second. And so then they said, okay, well, this is how long this substance has existed, and this is the radiometric data that we're seeing, and therefore we extrapolate backwards in time, and therefore the universe must be 14 billion years old. Okay, well, that's great if the speed of light is an absolute constant throughout time. If it's going 100 million times faster at the time of creation, we know that the speed of light is not a good measurement to measure our history. It is what God proclaimed it should be all along, which is orbital time through the celestial objects. And so as the Earth goes around the sun in essentially 365.2422 days in 1 year, that is how we're to measure days, and that's how we're to measure years, not through micro radiometric data and oscillations of atoms and the speed of light. That is not how we're to measure days and years. God told us to measure days and years through the orbital system that He created in creation. And the amazing thing is the orbital time has no bearing on the speed of light. So with the speed of light, the way it's slowing down and has been slowing down since creation, it doesn't affect the concept of days and years in the macro universe. And so they tried to impose a micro measurement on the macro history of the universe. And that is where the error, the massive error of billions of years came from. Absolutely, completely debunked, completely disproven. And the people who cling to that paradigm of understanding, of course, they can't have a young universe and a young Earth, because if they did, that means there is no way to describe it without a creator God that they would be accountable to. So despite the fact that we know with empirical scientific data, we know that there is no such thing as billions of years. You can prove it, you can see the data, you can see the redshift data, we know it for a fact. It's absolutely true. The Bible is true, but the scientists and the people who control the universities and the halls of academia, of course, they're not going to admit to it because it would destroy their entire godless paradigm of explaining everything through natural means, through evolution and all the other fallacious beliefs that they cling to, so that they don't have to answer to any higher power, any higher order, or answer to any morality. And in their view, morality is a human construct, and they can have moral relativism, and their morality is based on moral issue by moral issue on a moral issue by moral issue basis. So they can be as moral as they want to be, or claim to be, or appear to be on an issue by issue basis, and not have to answer to a creator God who established his morality and imposed it upon his creation. So anyway, we did a whole session on that in our Genesis 1-3 session, so go back and watch that if you want more information on that. I went through all of Barry Sitterfield's charts and stuff like that in that video, so go check that out if you want more info on that. Let's continue on here. And so the other reason that God made it is for them to be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth, and it was so. This is a very prophetic meaning, and we're going to talk about that shortly, so we'll come back to that in just a moment. And then here it says that God made. Okay, again, here the term made here is not bada. Let's go look at it so you can see. and God made, it's the term asa. This means to form and shape out of existing material. So again, on day one, God created the heaven and the earth. And when he created the earth, it was the domain, the dimensionality, the time domain, and the raw physical substance that would be needed to form and shape everything else that he created. And so that's why it says bara there. He created out of nothing. Here, it's asa, meaning he's forming and shaping out of existing material the two great lights. Okay, and of course we have the greater light, or ma'or, lamp, or luminary, or light bearer, or light holder, to rule the day. And the lesser light, again, ma'or, light bearer, luminary, or light holder, or lamp, to rule the night, layil. Um, and then I love this. Notice how this is a good point. I don't think I've covered this in this series yet, so let's cover it now. Let's notice this. If you'll notice here, I love this part. It's one of my favorite scriptures here. You'll notice that right here, the he made is in italics. And any word in your English Bibles that are in italics means that those words are not in the original Hebrew if you're in the Old Testament, or in the original Greek if you're in the New Testament. So those words aren't actually there. Somebody just inserted them because it makes the sentence flow a little bit better in English. Okay, in English we have a lot of connecting words, a lot of articles, a lot of conjunctions. Essentially in English there's a whole lot of fluff language. We have a lot of fluff words that they don't have in other languages. And I'm going to just read this to you again in this context. Notice this. And God made the two great lights, the greater light for the dominion of the day, the lesser light for the dominion of the night, the stars also. So you don't need to say he made the stars also for the sentence to be grammatically correct. Somebody just decided that that would make the sentence flow better. Okay? So, and God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the lesser light to rule the night, the stars also. You don't have to put he made in there. Somebody just did that to make the sentence kind of more palatable in English. But if you look at this, notice this, if you come to tools, you'll notice that if we get down to that he made part, notice there's no Hebrew equivalent. Notice here, there's no Hebrew words or Strong's numbering here for he made. That's because that isn't in the original. It doesn't exist. And so really it just reads this, the stars also. And I think that is absolutely hilarious. Because if you think about the majesty of the night sky and how they have all these unbelievably powerful telescopes and space telescopes and binocular telescopes and observatories here on Earth and satellite telescopes up in space, and they've done all this incredible astronomical research trying to look at the edge of the universe and seeing all these different galaxies, and people are mesmerized by the depth of it. And to God, it was just kind of like an afterthought, like, I'll throw some glitter up there too. But he did not do that in a haphazard way, because as we just talked about, if you research it, you'll see that all the constellations, all the stars, everything the way it was done is basically telling, proclaiming, preaching, declaring, praising God. His creation is praising him and telling the gospel story through the stars every single day and every single year. And so, but for him, this was just almost an afterthought that he just kind of threw some glitter up there in the sky as well. And so I think that's funny. As a matter of fact, I saw a tie one time that had this, and the tie on the tie, like a tie that a man would wear on a dress with a dress shirt. Uh, the tie just said the stars also, and it basically is implying how ironic that is, that this majestic celestial heaven that we get to gaze and wonder at on a daily, nightly basis, to him was just a casual afterthought. And another good point on this is that you and I, each person, that you are vastly more important to God than the entirety of all the galaxies of stars in the celestial heavens. Um, that He made that for us, and He also made that to support human life on Earth. The whole universe exists to support human life on Earth. That's what it's about. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute, too. So, here we go on, and God set them in the firmament in the heaven to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. Okay, so let's look at this. First of all, the lights, the greater light and the lesser light. The greater light and the lesser light, what are they there for? They're there to rule over the day and over the night. So what governs the daytime? Lights. What governs the nighttime? Lights. Light governs darkness, not the other way around. It's always light governing day and light governing darkness, but it's always the light that's in charge. It's always the light that is declaring what is going to happen and what is going to take place. It's never the darkness that's in charge. So the light governs the day and the righteousness, the goodness. Light also governs darkness, and any kind of evil that might flee to and run towards the darkness. It is also governed by light. So that's an important construct. In this segment, I also wanted to address a few more technical aspects before we get to the prophetic. Some people have had a hard time with this, unfortunately. Hopefully I can help you out with that a little bit here. But some people have looked at this, and because the Bible is written from a geocentric perspective, some people have a hard time with thinking about the earth revolving around the sun, and they have a hard time reconciling that with Scripture. But actually, it is in Scripture. You can go find it several times. Accurate statements about the mechanics of the celestial realm and how the sun goes through its courses. Keep in mind that as the earth rotates and revolves around the sun is also rotating and revolving in its orbit within the galaxy. And so, with all that understood, the sun is moving. And when it's described from the point of view of the earth, it's a geocentric perspective is in mind and in view. And so, since that geocentric perspective is in view, it is perfectly fine to talk about the scripture verses where the sun is going down. Because from our perspective, we say the sun down. The sun goes down and the sun rises from our perspective, and it's meant to be that way. And let me share this with you for your perspective. Some people have a hard time thinking about the sun and the earth revolving around the sun. Well, think about it like this. Does the earth in any way, shape, or form provide anything of value to the sun? Does the earth in any way serve the sun? And some people think, oh, well, the earth is subservient because it's, revolving around, and so things that revolve around other things are subservient to them. Well, let me correct that misconception here. Actually, if you really think about it, does the sun serve the earth? Yes. The sun provides light. The sun provides orbit and gravitation, the gravitational relationships. The sun provides heat, which brings forth life and plant life and warmth. And the sun is basically the earth's greatest servant. So the sun is serving the earth, not the earth serving the sun. And so when you think about it that way, Copernican astronomy should not bother you, because you could see that in the hierarchy of the way things work, the greater celestial object is actually the servant to the lesser celestial object. So the sun serves the earth. And I have a speculation here I wanted to share with you, kind of interesting. Let's look at this. in Revelation 19, there's this passage that says, Revelation 19:17, and I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God. So there's an angel here that apparently has charge over the sun itself. He's standing in the sun. And there's a lot of people who believe, myself included, that the angels do have charge over the celestial objects, that they are, uh, stewards, if you will, over the celestial objects like the sun, the stars, the moon, the planets, and all these celestial objects that various angels are stewards over those lights, and they are in charge, so to speak, of of stewarding the light that is shining forth from these celestial objects. And so, if you kind of conceptualize that, think about this. Could it be that the original angel, who was the chief angel, the cherub who covereth, the anointed cherub, the one who was head over all the other cherubim, the highest ranking angel, it was none other than Lucifer. The the term Lucifer meaning, of course, um, son of the morning, or the morning star, as different people translate it different ways. Could it be that Satan was originally, as the chief angel, was in charge of the chief celestial object in the sky, the sun? And as he saw that it was going to be his job to be a servant to the earth, and his light was going to serve the earth rather than be served, because of his own vainglory, his own pride and iniquity and ambition that were found in him, that he abandoned his post because he did not want to serve. He wanted to be served. And so it's a possibility. I don't put too much weight on it, but I put it forth as a supposition for consideration and for thought-provoking attention. That could it be that he was the one that wanted people to worship him, and so when he saw that he was going to be in charge of a celestial light that was going to be a servant to mankind here on earth, that he didn't like that job very much. He didn't like the idea of being a servant. And we know that in God's economy, the greater, as Christ teaches us, should serve the lesser. The greatest among you shall be as the servant, and serve the lesser. And so the higher up that you want to go in God's hierarchy, you need to become more and more of a servant. And as I shared a phrase a long time ago that says, if you wish to be a leader, endeavor to be a servant, because that's how things work in God's economy. And so think about that. Now, for the prophetic side of things, on this, it is interesting to note that this is the fourth day. This is day 4, and we can see that here in Genesis 1:19. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And so, as we have the fourth day, well, if you analogize that to the 4,000 years of 4 millennia, um, think about what happened on the fourth day. Well, the fourth day is the day when Christ was born and he came into the world. And now, if you look at this, take a look at John 1, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And so here you see that on day 4, we have God creating lights, or light bearers, or light holders, to shine light on the earth in the celestial objects. But on the fourth the fourth millennium, day 4 is day with the Lord is like 1,000 years. 1,000 years is like unto a day. On the fourth millennia, you have Jesus coming to be a light on the world. If you think about it like that, like he was walking around on the earth as the spiritual light, as the spiritual guide to all men, giving them spiritual life through being born again in him. And so, if you consider that aspect of these things and the prophetic understanding of this, you could see that throughout the first 3,000 years, um, up until Christ came, or right around the 4,000 year mark, when Christ came, for that first 4,000 years, was there light? Was there Christ? Was there God? Of course. Of course there was, but hadn't been manifested yet in the flesh. And so, just like that same concept of, well, the sun, moon, and stars didn't exist till the fourth day, well, Christ, the true Son, the Son of God, shining forth the true light, spiritual light, he didn't manifest until the 4,000th year when he came on the scene into his earthly ministry. And he was a light holder. Think about that, that he was a light holder. He came in the flesh as a man, yet he held in him the light of God, which he shared through the ministry that God the Father commanded him to, and commissioned him and commanded him to execute, which he executed with precision and perfection, and complete and total obedience and subservience to him. So again, the light, the greatest light of all, became the servant to the earth, just like we talked about the sun. Um, the sun, the earth is not subservient to the sun. The sun is the greatest servant to the earth. And so, likewise, the Son of God came as the greatest light of all, the Son of God himself, yet he came to serve, not to be served. And so you see that contrast there in this particular construct and this prophetic understanding of this passage. So, anyway, I think we'll wrap it up there for today. I hope you've enjoyed this next video in our series. Remember that Jesus is the true light, and if you know him, you can have the peace of God. No Jesus, no peace, no light. And so, hope you're enjoying the series. God bless you guys. We'll see you here, there, in the air, or in the next video.